you're watching will concern editing and altering a video game. The video game contains an intro that is sometimes called flyby. It is actually the file called unreal.unr, and it's part of the video game Unreal. This is Unreal version 1, Engine 1, and Unreal Editor. I do believe it's 1 point something. And it's one of the older video games that I like to edit, and some of you may have played and may have forgotten. The intro, which is, by the way, listed on the upper left here in a trigger event, intro begin trigger. This is a trigger that you land on, or is automatically set when you start the game, that when you land on it, it grabs you as the player and drags you around the level. This is so that you can't play the level and you have to hit the escape key, which is the instruction it has at the top of the page, so that you then can start the game proper. Now, the level itself is a copy of part of another level that's called the Nally Castle. Now, the part about this that's important on screen is the instructions that are used that I'm editing. The process here is to turn off the loop at the end so you drop to the ground, and then where you drop, not have it re-trigger, which is what this trigger is supposed to do to you, and instead have you land on something that also gives you something to work with in the game, or more accurately in the intro file or the intro map, and so you can walk around in the map as much as you can. I'm going to be using this as something to edit to demonstrate how this is done. Please understand, if you're a copyright flagging kind of person, that the file itself and the game don't actually have a copyright control on me giving up this information. The setting initially active is normally set to true, but we set it to false, so it's not initially active until we land on it. Trigger once only is set to true, so it'll stop looping, but it's not enough. We then have to go to interpolation point number 31 and edit end of path to say true. And that will stop it from looping. Now there's another concerning issue of it playing music for the level. Now normally the music in the Unreal levels is kind of long and they loop nicely and they're really entertaining pieces of music. However, this one is really short because it's a rather short loop, and they made it short enough that it would start over again right at the point you finish this really fast flyby loop. So I'm setting the audio to turn off in the next page. What we do is we put a music event into place that's this little dragon head. We add it in, and we give it an event tag. You can also put the event tag and event as being the same name, like got gun or whatever. And we have it run bSilence. Whatever we name it in the tag or the event, actually I make them both the same normally. We then want to put it to some object we can land on. When the game level ends, we end up landing right about here. In fact, almost exactly on these 3 pixels here. And we put down something to land on. It can be any item. We just need something there to land on that our act of grabbing it will trigger something so that we can have it trigger the event music, or the music event. And all it does is says bSilence, meaning it then fades out the music as fast as needed. In this case, I threw a dispersion pistol in place, and I gave it a got gun event, and I might have also done that with a tag. It doesn't matter. All it is it's acting as something to trigger it. The reason for the dispersion pistol is several reasons. One, it can act like a flashlight, and there's a lot of levels, sections that are black, dark. You can't see anything. Number 2, it's useful for making things move, which will come up in the next 2 pictures that I'm going to bring up. And we can use it to break a window, which is the only other thing in the level besides something we need to activate. Next, this is the window. The window is a mover. A mover is simply something that if you interact with it, or if you have something programmatically tell it to move, like that event tag, for instance, it'll move a mover from one point to another or make it move through a pattern of movements. They're very sensitive. If you try to interact with them, even in the editor, it'll try to move itself to another position, which means it might mess up its movements. Anyway, what we do is we find the mover, and it'll have something like breaking glass or break glass as the event or tag. I copied it into both because as long as you don't have dozens of these, it's okay to do this. And then I added in something called breaking glass, and we look under the exploding wall section because that's where it's supposed to be. And we tell it to use the glass texture because we're using glass rather than wall texture. And we give it the right one, and it's called Gen In, or General Interior, Tiles, Tile number 5. which is what they use to draw the mover. Also, we changed the event to break glass, just like the mover's name, so that if we hit the mover, this sets off this little explodey toy here, and it throws shards of glass, and it also has a sound effect. Sound, Unreal, Share, Generalized, Break Glass Sound. Now, the problem is if we don't do these tags exactly right, if we fire at it, it might make the mover move out of the way, and then we have to shoot it again to make the glass move. So the reason I did break glass, or whatever I'm titling it for the event tag and event tag here, is that if I happen to hit this item, this instruction set, it'll also break glass and move the mover. So they will both work. That way it doesn't have to be done twice. Next, the only other thing in the level that you can interact with without having to completely rebuild the level, which is very important here, is yet another mover. And again, with a mover, you have to be careful not to accidentally move it. We need to change its settings, and we still have to right-click it to do so. We're changing the mover settings to, say, dynamic light mover. It's not needed that it do that, but that's what it was set at in the level it came from, because this, again, they kind of cut and pasted from another level, and that's what the setting was. I'm also adding in damage triggered, meaning that I can set off this mover not just by bumping into it, but by shooting it, just like I shoot the window. That'll come important in a minute. I also gave it bump type any, which means any interaction with it will make it move. That makes it annoying because it'll keep moving every time you come near it, but that's good enough, okay? You can change these later, but it makes it serviceable in the level. And then mover sounds, sound, doors, ANC, other, chain, D1 was missing, so we add that in. And again, that's copied, or more accurately, I noted that, from the original level this was originally ripped from. And that concludes the slideshow version of what we're doing here for the next second or so. Now we're in the editor itself proper. Again, here is our little dispersion pistol and the sound event. Sound event property, or music event property, excuse me, and it says here, be silence is true. And I gave it event end music in the tag. That's the minimum, but again, unless you absolutely have a reason not to, put it in both so that it will reciprocally react, meaning it will also trigger the other thing. And then here is our little dispersion pistol. We hit the event and we give it the same tag, end music. That's not needed or required, but I recommend you do drop in here using the utilities by going in here, classes, inventory, weapon, dispersion pistol, and then right-click and add it. That's the reason I'm telling you to do it, is because you need to have something there to interact with the rest of the level. Again, here's the looping utility routine, interpolation point property, and again, object says it's interpolation point 31. It's the last one in the series. And we look in here and we say end of path is true. That should be enough, but it isn't, to make it stop. By the way, you may notice I click a texture and then unclick it. It's so that I'm not selecting anything. I know there's a function for making it unselect things, but I also know that it never seems to work for me. Now, that is our, excuse me, I went off the wrong direction. That is the thing we land on that sets the whole thing off. Trigger. Event, begin, trigger, intro. That's the name for it. And we end up having to make a few changes to the trigger so that it's initially not active or false, and trigger only once is true, so it only works once. That way we can walk around here, and if we run into it, it doesn't grab us and start dragging us around the level again. This is the castle. There's the castle window. And now we go into the ritual. In order to make this thing not get buggy and move something to a random part of the map, I've learned to click the map, left click only, and then hover over it, and I have a touchpad on my computer along with the mouse that's physically external. I will right click on the tab on my touchpad so that I can get the mover properties up without moving it. Again, if you even touch the dang thing, it might move around. Okay, here's the mover sounds. It doesn't have any. It could be altered to do stuff like that, but it's not needed. Events, tower glass, and collision. Excuse me, not collision. I'm sorry. Mover. Damage trigger is true. This was set originally. Now again, select texture, deselect texture. Now we have the little explodey thing, I'm going to call it, breaking glass properties. The events and event tag and event name are all tower glass. And on the breaking wall or exploding wall, we have Unreal Share Sound, breaking glass, and then the texture tile, blah, 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 for the glass texture when it flies off in various directions. Next. And yes, you can set it to be see-through glass or whatever, but that's not needed. It'll only be seen for literally a half second. And again, we're at another mover, and again, we do the ritual. Click the wall, unclick the wall, hover over it, and if possible, don't move the mouse while you right-click. And usually, but not always, it won't move it. It uses keyframes, and again, it will break the level if it moves it too much. The mover is set to damage trigger, yes. I added light mover as well, just because it's a copy from another copy of the thing, from the other level it was based on. And then mover sounds, I added in that one here that says chain D1. And, well, you get the idea. So that concludes all of the changes I've made to it. I haven't changed any of the geometry of the level. Now I'm going to bring up something that makes it give you a wireframe view so you can see the really hardcore details of the game. I'm going to show you something that hopefully will be less confusing. I have gotten used to seeing this. You may not be able to. Mode, map perspective brings up a really ugly wireframe version. Here we go. And it's as clear as mud. Anyway, when we move around, we can gain a three-dimensional-ish view. And we see here a pink object. Okay, now I'm going to get us up in the air, turn around, and let's see if we can find any more of these light pink or pale colored things. This entire tower, that tower right there, is a pink thing. There are other things like over here is a wedge or a shelf or a walkway that's also those. These objects have indeterminate characteristics when it comes to editing or interacting with them. Now we'll go back to textures. This thing over here was not added to the level correctly, even by the people who wrote it originally. And because of that, it has a set of peculiarities that make it to where if we edit it, we get defects like this that I'm going to show you in a second. You see, there's the tower. When we go in here, this area here is not supposed to be able to still be visible from inside of it. That means it was not properly subtracted or cut into to establish that, which means it'll form an aberration. We go in here, and we go a little bit further and turn around, we see, again, the tower. But if we waltz into it just a little ways, boom, we can see that part of it should be visible. In order to fix that, it has to be altered. While we're in that editing position, we have to, in later videos, go through and find every one of those and make them into a solid object that we can cut into, because otherwise, if we try to edit the level, these things will cause anomalies that can cause a crash or make it impossible to finish compiling the level, which is probably the reason they just left it like this. It's kind of cool. In other videos that we do, or I do, I will show you how to add entire levels and layers to it to flesh it out. And also things like, when we view it with dynamic lighting, adding extra fog or moving it around, making this water actually work so you can float in it, and adding fish and that sort of thing for fun. And really that concludes what we've got here for today. Hope you've been entertained or informed. And I will have an entire separate video tutorial on how to interact in this, because I'm not showing you how I'm moving around on the level, because honestly, that's a whole separate video. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that.